Hey guys, Nick here, and today we're getting into part 4 of What If Daryl Died Instead of Merle. Now, in the last episode, we covered Merle, Rick, Michonne, and everybody else saving the likes of Andrea and Milton, and pretty much the rest of their group and Woodbury from the governor, with Merle and Michonne doing a tag team effort in putting down the governor, and Merle officially, with the help of Andrea's good talk and everybody else's great astonishment and agreement, Merle becoming the leader of Woodbury. Today we're going to cover that more extensively and a particular twist that will open up a new chapter in this particular story. Now, Merle has officially been anointed the leader of Woodbury. Governor Merle, or just Merle the governor, if you will. Sort of. He's just the leader. I don't think they'd call him the governor, but who cares? Rick would also agree with this and actually have to admit himself that he is even proud of the way that Merle has changed and can get an entire town and everything to, like him and everything, and thinks that he's a good leader to be here. But then Merle stops by and sees Rick in the crowd and smiles at him, saying, "Where are you going, Officer Friendly?" And then he would go to Rick and ask, "Where are you going?" more extensively. And it's like, he knows that Rick and them most likely are going to go to the prison, but tells him that they don't have to. They can stay here in Woodbury, and they don't have to go back to that prison. Not only will them being here help out more, but this was his entire point, to prove to them how good he was and for their help. But he didn't want them to leave afterwards, and them being here is much better than being at the prison, especially with how things went with the governor. Staying here is ultimately what will make their lives better. He wanted that. That was the point. And Rick has to agree that the town, especially with Merle being here and better care of it and its people, even Rick has to admit that Merle's right. If they go back to the prison, more problems are just going to arise. Prison flu. And Merle, seeing Rick agreeing with this and agreeing to Merle's terms, however lenient they are, because, they're obviously sort of friends now, he's happy that Rick chose this and doesn't want to go off and everything. I don't see why he would. He helped out, and Andrea's alive and everything like that. So after this, and every one of Rick's group agreeing to stay also and get the people from the prison, Herschel, Carl, and Beth, here's the survivors. Milton, Schumpert, Andrea, and all the governor's men, along with Merle being the head of it all, the main survivor of the Season 3 canonical time period, with Daryl being the unfortunate circumstance to make this happen. Also, we would get into Lizzie, Mika, and their father, who will be mentioned sooner or later, which will have a very big twist on how Lizzie becomes in the story, along with Bob, Karen, and David showing their folds into the story at one point or another also. But one person isn't so happy about the exchange of the groups and the entire process. Alan, because if it weren't for Merle's brother, his son would still be alive. But Merle, do you really think that he's going to listen to Alan try to preach his logic or whatever he wants to call it? Nope. He kicks Alan straight in the face and says, whatever Daryl did to his son, it was because either A, he got in the way of the shot, which is literally what happened in the canonical story and this story, or he chose the wrong side. Technically both, but you get what I mean. And Merle says he's going to do the exact same thing to Alan if he wants to act like he's on the wrong side. He can be with him or against him. Now, Alan, he might have been an idiot, but there's one thing he was not, and that was an idiot. Well, what do I mean by that? I mean that he was freaking foolish and way out of his place, but he never drove himself to not at least be somewhat smart. So he would definitely have no choice but to agree with this. And with this, we stage ourselves at Woodbury for the foreseeable future, which is literally a meme at this point, since almost every The Walking Dead story I've had since I got back into the fold of Walking Dead after the Dragon Ball stories has literally been featured in Woodbury. But you guys are going to have to get used to that, especially for this one, because, spoiler alert, we're not just going to be at Woodbury for this episode into the next one. We're literally going to be at Woodbury until the end of the series. I'm not joking. That's how Merle's dynamic is going to evolve in this story. Woodbury's literally going to become the be-all, end-all of this story. So we're going to have to get used to that. Here, next, we're going to talk about relationships. And particular, one set of relationships that I had you guys talk about on a poll. Now, we had a discussion on the poll, along with a few other ones, this one being first, about which relationship should happen. Either A, Merle and Andrea, or B, Merle and Michonne. And I asked you guys for this particular decision. And even though I did not keep up the poll for too long, 90% of you guys picked Merle and Andrea above Merle and Michonne with 31 votes and 6 likes. So it wasn't an extremely long or big vote between everybody, but I still feel that the amount of people that did vote and the way that it showed here, a 90-10 for God's sakes, showed that it was just best to not push the vote further, because it just seemed like it was a killer vote. It was a one-sided vote. So, for the rest of the story, Merle and Andrea, literally till the end and into the spin-off, which will happen, the Merle and Beta spin-off, if you guys haven't caught on to the community post and all that, will be featured with the relationship of the two main characters here, Merle and Andrea. So, yeah, how is this going to happen, you might ask? How does it get into a relationship stature? Well, I'll explain. You see, while Merle's getting into the fold of being the new governor/leader, with everyone's help, praise, and astonishment, along with figuring out everything to fully get himself into the fold of being the governor, or leader, if you will. It really doesn't matter which one you want to call it. He goes to talk to Andrea about the way she helped him, about the way that she stood up for him, and how they talked before, and everything like that. And he knows that he talked to her about this before she wanted to go off or her give the map about Daryl and everything, about why they never hooked up. And he brings this up again and asks, since you stood up for me, since all this is over and we both have a better understanding of who each other are, and we've both changed, obviously, what would you say to us now? And that's literally, I think, how he would word it. And Andrea thinks about this for a second, actually. Longer than she did. For obvious reasons. And says, after thinking, if Merle had killed the governor and Daryl had died and all that happened sooner than it did, she would have still said, heck no. But because of how everything went, and yes, she did stand up for him, and how it all went down, she's willing to agree. She will. They'll go steady for now, and it's not going to be like a big relationship, but she does agree. It's just not going to be big right now, because she's still got to get used to how everything's changing. Not with him, but with how everything's went and like coming to terms with the governor and how all that went down. But she does agree to this because she stood up for him and does admit that Merle's changed a ton. She meant what she said to all those people, which is why she wanted him to become the leader. And Merle is very thankful for this because he was afraid she'd just say no again. And if not, let's be honest, it would have just been Merle and Michonne. But hey, I wouldn't have made a poll if I wasn't going to make the decision happen in the story, you know? It would have been pointless. And Michonne would, at one point or another, from either Andrea or Merle or just finding out, would be happy for Merle, not only because of how he changed from a guy who everyone talked about being a freaking druggie and how rude he was and everything like that, and trying to kill her, to a guy that's actually a leader of a whole town and a much better person. Now, to get on to other relationships. We get Beth and Zach, who I've literally never mentioned in a story, either because I forgot about the character or just because there was no way to really include him. And Bob and Sasha, because like I said, Bob obviously, along with Lizzie, Mika, and them would get involved sooner or later, would get into a relationship. Now, with the group of kids consisting of Carl, Patrick, Lizzie, Mika, and the two randos that I don't know their names of, that we saw at the prison in season 4, I'm going to talk about relationship status with them. Now, why? They're kids. Well, for now, hear me out. We're going to get an interesting beginning mark for Carl and Mika getting into a relationship. And that's very random, I know, but it's going to become a big relationship down the line, and there's no Sophia. So, Carl and Mika will eventually get into a big relationship. It's small now. Karen and Tyrese would get into a relationship. Glenn and Maggie, they would, evolve their relationship more. And even though Rick and Michonne didn't really start showing true interest in each other until like maybe the end of season 4 into season 5, I'm going to say that because of circumstances, they begin to start something. Like Carl and Mika, it's not going to evolve into much. It's sort of a beginning phase. So I guess you could call this Carl and Rick's poetic justice in a way, if you will. So yeah. And with all of that, Woodbury would prosper more than any version of it I've ever made happen in a story, because of Merle being the leader and just because of circumstances with the timeline. So ultimately, yeah. Now, this is the point where you probably expect me to say something about Negan, Mitch and Pete, and them meeting.
Right. Wrong!
Like the Dale story, we're going to do something a little bit different with them, but I'll mention it towards the end of the episode. That's not the twist that I was talking about at the beginning, but I'll mention them near the end of the episode and tell you guys what happens. Anyway, now we're going to get into looks of everybody, because this is an important aspect we need to get into. For Rick first, he is actually going to adopt a look similar to his season 5, end of season 5, going into the beginning of season 6's counterpart. Now I know, there's going to be like 75 of you thinking, why? Even if he didn't have a big beard, why would he shave it off? Why is he adopting that look? Few reasons. 1, Daryl's sacrifice and how much it meant. 2, the undermining threat of the governor and Andrea being alive and so many circumstances. Because of all this, it would build up to Rick, even if Daryl made a sacrifice and that would down him, everything that's happened has given Rick more sense of morale and given him a better dosage of hope, if you will. So he wouldn't feel as dark or want to get away or anything like that, and would actually be okay. And he would want, or maybe ask, to borrow his hat like he teased in season 2 with Carl whenever Carl got shot. Now I know what you guys are thinking.
Oh, Nick, why would he want the hat back if he gave it to Carl, even if he joked about it?
Well, that's the thing. That would actually make Rick borrowing it now poetic and kind of sweet, because they would get to share the hat. And I am going to have Rick wear it a lot more than Carl down the line, but not right now. No. Just later down the line for other reasons. But I'm not going to get into that fully. Now for Merle, I teased this a lot too. Merle is going to get rid of the knife hand, and now we're going to get him adopting a sword hand. Now, why did I specifically choose this? Well, Merle has seen Michonne's blade, how she worked with it, and how it felt really good to be able to wield the blade, because that little bit still happened before Daryl came in here. So that scene still happened. So eventually, he would take matters into his own hands, take off the cap with the knife hand, and either with someone's help or his own, get a sword, not Michonne's, but another one, because I guarantee you they had another one somewhere, like the sword you see here in the picture. And soon enough, either with the help of someone or himself, we would get to see Merle Dixon with a sword hand. Now I know another thing, you guys are probably like, how is he able to wield that with how heavy the sword must be on his hand? A knife is one thing, but why a sword? Well, I'm going to get into that later on in the series too. Just think for now, he's getting used to it, but will become way more accustomed with it in the future. And yeah, he remains the leader of Woodbury, obviously. Andrea would have nothing changed with her with looks, but with her position of power at Woodbury, with her slowly getting more into a relationship with Merle, she would become much more like her old lawyer self and be the second in command of Woodbury, helping with positioning and managerial rules and everything like that, being obviously with Merle and everything. It would be a great obvious thing to put her in second in command. Milton would be the third one in command, following that kind of role just by himself, and just like sort of a council between the three of them. And the pits with the walkers and everything, and Milton's work would be shut down, because Merle's not gonna have that. That was the governor's little freaking sick ways of, you know, dealing with the apocalypse and being himself. Martinez would be in charge of weapons and basically all gun control and everything like that, and watch posts, and be in charge of all that. He would be like the main guard, if you will. Then Merle goes to Michonne with a specifically interesting position for her. And once he goes to talk to her and has given these people their positions, Andrea didn't really need to be told, but he tells Michonne that he thinks that the job he has ready for her will fit her immensely. He wants her to be the blacksmith of Woodbury, crafting weapons, because let's be honest, they will run out of ammo eventually, even if they scavenge, and who knows how many melee weapons they'll be able to scrap up. But with a blacksmith, especially with help, they can make Woodbury a freaking gold mine, which it will become later in the series. And Michonne, she's going to agree to this, but she does have one particular question. Why her? Why specifically? She's not really angry or too confused, but she wants to hear from Merle why she's getting the blacksmith job specifically. And Merle has a straightforward answer. He knows Michonne's abilities with the blade, how she wields it, how she has a good manage on control in a group, even if she was on her own, especially with Andrea. And this would greatly help with the forging of weapons and the control of people here in the town and everything like that for the future. It's a great way to use like the abilities that they have, like their strong suits. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, Michonne agrees, and it's all said and done with there. Also, another character that I've barely ever mentioned because once again, I either forgot the character or didn't have a story to fit him in, Carl and Patrick would actually become very close friends here, like they sort of had been, except Patrick was way more immature. And Merle's leadership of Woodbury would advance very much so. So now not only do people respect him as the leader, they adore him as the leader. They're not gonna like bow down to him or anything, but he is thousands of times better leader than the governor. And now, here's the point where I said that I would mention Pete and the militia at one point or another near the end of the episode, and what would happen to them since they're not going to see Negan because of circumstances. Well, here's how it happens. Martinez and Schumpert, got the names mixed up, they would eventually, while out on runs, because Martinez once again is in charge of runs, gun equipment, etc., they would run across Pete and the militia while on runs and would bring them to Woodbury for questioning, and because their tank and their resources could be very valuable. And let's be honest, they'd be much better at Woodbury than on their own, especially if they encounter another group. And Merle would agree to have them as long as they abide by his and everybody else's rules, allow sharing of equipment and information, stuff like that, and they don't try anything. Basically follow rules again, except much more seriously. And Pete and the militia, everyone except mainly Mitch, I would feel, would agree to this. Because, let's be honest, for two things. Number one, they don't really have a lot of options because, yeah, they could get attacked and killed. And number two, staying here with a freaking huge town, bunch of people, weapons and everything, they lucked out. And Merle does not seem that bad a guy. But little do they know everyone here and what's going on and everything. And Merle would say that they made a great choice coming here and agreeing to live here and everything else. Soon enough, after the militia has been settled, some time passes, not too long, but some time, when one day, while Woodbury is just functioning like normal, they hear a knock at the gates. And Martinez and a few men, Schumpert or whoever, it doesn't matter, they would approach the gates, open them up, and ask the people what their business is. A ginger-haired man, a guy who looks like some sort of scientist, and a girl with a safari outfit and a hat all present themselves. And the main ginger-haired man, Abraham, Rosita, and Eugene, I was just trying to give them a dramatic entrance, they introduce themselves and say, like what you've done here with this town. You'll like it even more when we tell you that Eugene here knows exactly what caused this all to happen. And I think that you all should join us in saving the world. Will Merle and everybody else want to? Or is Woodbury too great to pass up? Find out next time.